All right, cool. It is recording. Hello, my name is Malia Arel. It is March 19th. The time is currently 7:16 Central Time, and 5:16 Pacific Time. I am here with four wonderful voice actors, very talented people, to discuss their late friend Rick May. We will do introductions now, starting with Dennis, then going to Ellen, then Gary, and then John.
Rolling? Good. I'm Dennis Bateman, and on in the game TF2, I play the spy and the pyro. Um, my profession is actor, basically, which I set off to planning to earn my living on stage, and soon found out that it was not really feasible to do that, and then branched off into voiceovers, actually with a little brochure that I found in Chicago, by the way. Someone handed it to me about how to be a voiceover actor. And so I took the few little hints that I got in there about getting a demo tape put together and finding an agent. And I was working out of St. Louis, Missouri at the time, since I'm from Southern Illinois. And I started getting cast. So I had a lot of fun doing that. And so for many, many years, I lived in New York City and worked there in commercials and corporate training, industrial narrations, and things like that, the bread and butter. Then, after moving to Seattle in 1990, uh, I was lucky enough to get in on sort of the cusp of the digital game industry and started auditioning for that. And so that led me to several, the higher profile games at the time. I remember auditioning. I've copied from the auditions for Pajama Sam and Spy Fox. And then, the technology got better. So we were doing more animated stuff like Team Fortress 2 and No One Lives Forever. And I was just very lucky to be able to audition for TF2 because I recall being in a play at that time, a musical. And I was relieved from rehearsal on one particular day so that I had the free time to go down and do this audition. Managed to book the role of the spy first, and then was just offered a shot at this character who no one understands what he says because he wears a gas mask. And they said, yeah, that's good enough. Okay, good. Yeah, we like that. So I became the spy and the pyro. So I would say that at this point, late, the phoenix sort of rose from the ashes for me, and the TF2 has emerged as undoubtedly the most recognizable thing that I'm known for now. And it goes on with a global fan base now that I wasn't aware of. And glad to be here with Malia talking about our game. Now, as
Awesome.
far as Rick May goes, Rick was just one of the most jovial guys I ever knew, and always ready to help you with whatever he could. If you needed an obscure piece from a musical that he had, then he was a great resource for that. I finally had to tell him, stop sending me jokes on email because they're flooding my inbox. But he always had a joke ready, and was just as much fun as can be imagined. So we miss him a lot.
Great. Thank you. Ellen?
Thanks, Malia. I'm Ellen McLain, and I am best known for voicing the role of GLaDOS in the Portal games, and I've also voiced the administrator in Team Fortress 2.
Great. Thank you. Gary?
Hi, I'm Gary Schwartz, and I am probably currently best known for being the voice of the Heavy and the Demo Man in Team Fortress 2. But back in the 80s and 90s, I was in a film called Quest for Fire, where I played Ruka, the firekeeper. And I was also on the TV series Zoobly Zoo in the 1980s, starring Ben Vereen, and I was one of the co-stars of that show for 65 episodes. which ran for about 10 years on PBS.
No, but you have to tell them
Awesome.
how you started. I love the story from how you started to where you got to the profession you got into.
Yes, originally I did not start out as a voiceover actor. I started out as a mime, so I had a long way to go.
I just love that. So I also started out as a composer and a guitarist and did that for many years. Met Ellen I was actually in the orchestra of a Broadway tour, of a European tour of a Broadway show, and Ellen was in the cast. And, she took one look at my face and said, you ought to be in voiceover.
True.
I just have I have the face for voiceover. But anyway, we moved out to Seattle in '89 and started auditioning for stuff. And Sierra Online and Humongous and Monolith and some of those early game companies were up here at that time, and they started sending out auditions for games. And Dennis and I both ended up in Spy Fox, and there was one called a Betrayal at Antara. And I remember Championship Bass Fishing was an early game that I was in, and SWAT 2, and then No One Lives Forever. Gary or Dennis and I were both in. And Gary.
Did you do Halo?
Yeah, some Halo games. Yeah, and The Suffering was an early couple of games that I was in, and then lots of games, and then we both Ellen and I both auditioned for Half-Life 2, which is the first Valve game we auditioned for, and they happened to hire us both, and they had no idea that we were married to each other at the time, so that was fun. And I'm probably best known as the sniper in TF2, and then Pudge and Earthshaker in Dota 2, and for my penchant for not paying bills on time, I'm probably known for that.
I pay bills on time.
Right.
Oh, you just reminded me that I'm actually the invoker in Dota.
Oh, right.
Oh, and I am Lich, and Pugna, and Sniper in Dota 2.
Right, it gets very confusing, right? And then I'm Darkseid. I mean, I'm like 7 different heroes in Dota. Right.
I had no idea all this was so incestuous.
But both deadly.
They keep auditioning her for nice characters in Dota, but they end up no, you're just evil.
They told me they were saving you for something more poisonous. So
Wow.
I'm the Brood Mother, the big spider, and I'm Death Prophet.
Yeah, so that's us.
That is great. Wow, thank you. Awesome. We can go into the questions. This order will be John, Gary, Ellen, and Dennis. The question is, how did you individually meet Rick May?
Okay, let's see. So back in the 90s, I'm pretty sure I met Rick at an audition of something. And it might have been a voiceover audition, or it might have been a theater audition, but we got to know each other. And he actually offered me a job directing a show because he was running a theater at the time. What did they call it back then?
Is this the one in Renton? The
No.
theater?
It was the musical theater, the big musical theater.
Oh.
Right.
I'm blocking it, but
anyway,
yeah. No.
It was a theater that just did musicals
in Seattle.
Right. But by that time, Rick and I had been doing Jim French productions. Jim French is the guy who started Imagination Theater, and he voiced Inspector Lestrade in The Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and I was Sherlock, and Dennis was in that show a lot too. But I didn't meet him there. I'm pretty sure I met him either at a voiceover audition or at a theater audition.
But he ran the theater where Mary Levine was the music director.
Right. It was like,
and I'm blocking the name of it.
It's changed names 2 or 3 times since then. So,
but he ran that theater company.
Right. So that's pretty much how I met Rick.
Great. Gary?
Yeah, I met Rick exactly in the same way at auditions, quite a lot of them, I think. Uh, and was Rick? Whose agent was Rick? Was that Topo Swope?
I think there was another agent. What was her name? That lady that was here back then?
Right.
Oh, the older lady. Oh,
Right.
her name. Gosh, that was a long time ago.
Right. So he wasn't with my agency, but we seemed to
Right.
go out on all of the same calls.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Carol,
Yeah,
James?
Carol James, maybe. Yeah.
maybe it was Carol
Well,
I
James.
th
Yeah.
I think he was with her. I don't think he was with Tish.
or Topo. Okay.
who was that? Who was that lady though that had been a really old timer? She was like Dick Arnold era. That had her
But
own. God, I can't. It's been so long. I can't remember.
Well, I remember Carol James
right.
Oh, I
because
was with Carol.
I had
Yeah,
other
Carol
friends
was
who
my
were
agent.
Carol James.
Well, in any event, we got to know each other just sitting around at auditions, waiting to go in, and just gossiping back and forth. I don't think did. I don't know if I even worked with him on the Imagination Theaters that I did with Jim French, maybe one or two times.
Because
But
you didn't do the Sherlocks very often, right? We did.
I did a few Sherlocks,
Uh-huh.
but
But
just
of course, Inspector Lestrade wasn't in all of them. So yeah.
yeah. Uh, anyway, that's basically it, and we just wished each other luck all the time. He was just the nicest guy. We would trade jokes. We both loved telling jokes, so there was a lot of one joke leads to another joke leads to another joke, and that's basically how I knew him. Always running into him at auditions.
So
That's
I
great.
I met Rick through working with Jim French. So Jim French was an old radio voice, and he worked in LA and he worked up here and he was very well known. And he started his company called Imagination Theater. Well, once for the organization Radio Enthusiasts of Puget Sound,
Mhm.
REPS, I got a call to be a singer and go in and sing some, 1930s, 40s big band hits. And Jim French played. So I met Jim French. And I just so happened, this was about 1997, 1998. I just so happened to take one of John Patrick Lowrie's cassette voice demos and said, because I knew what Jim did, and I knew he created all this radio drama. And I said, here is my husband's demo. Well, Jim, God bless him, listened to John's demo and immediately hired John. Then, eventually, when he needed another female voice, I got called. So I first met Rick. You see, all these guys, Gary and Dennis and John were of an age. So with Rick, they would be at auditions together. I wouldn't be at auditions with Rick because we weren't the same type. When I started working with Rick at Jim French's studio out in Bellevue at his home studio, and Rick would be there. And Rick was very flirtatious. And
Well.
I mean, but he was just all. I mean, I don't know if you could call it flirting or just auditioning. I mean, the guy was always auditioning. He was just one of
he
those.
was always on, but
Yeah,
he would
yeah.
be, and we would be out there in this little tiny studio, much smaller than this room that John and I are in now. And there'd be 5 or 6 voice actors and Jim French, and would be around a series of microphones. And so I'd be sitting next to Rick May, and he'd be telling jokes and laughing and so and so on. And I was just thinking, I just want to do a good job so I get hired again. And Rick is just laughing and doing this. But anyway, that's how I first met Rick May.
Well, I think this is a good point to set the scene as far as the atmospheric level of work that we were doing. I mean, back in the late 90s, if you did a show for Imagination Theater, for Jim French Productions, you were paid $40 per show, 40 whole dollars. You could spend any of those dollars anywhere you wanted to. 40 of them. So yeah, this was some pretty stratospheric stuff.
It was union work.
That's right. It was
union work, and we're all members of the union.
Yeah, an occasional wooden nickel thrown in there, but
that's right. That's right.
just for old time's sake.
But but Rick was great. Rick was great, and I mean, another reason, Malia, that we kept doing this is because wonderful actors. Jim French would hire wonderful actors, and we loved working together, and we loved doing the work.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Dennis?
Well, this is really a trip down memory lane with Rick and all these folks. Rick truly was like the best way to describe him is just one great big funny bone, and you know, he just kept people in stitches all the time. I never saw him not smiling. But I think I met Rick at doing a Imagination Theater show. I suppose it must have been Sherlock, because he was Inspector Lestrade for so long. What was it you just said, Ellen? Jogged my memory about something, but yeah. Well, anyway, he was just a fun guy, and I also know that he did a one-man show, which I never unfortunately got the chance to see, based on Theodore Roosevelt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
did any of you see him in that?
No, I never did, but I knew he did. He did Teddy Roosevelt. And, you know, every so often in a recording session, he'd say something as Teddy.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Well, and because when I lived in New York, I lived in New York at the same time Dennis did. I lived in New York City from 1979 to 1987. And while I was there, I was very involved with a musical about Teddy Roosevelt called Teddy and Alice, because Alice was Teddy's oldest daughter from his marriage, and I played Alice for a whole series of backers auditions and at the White House in 1985. But anyway, so Rick and I would talk about Teddy Roosevelt because I knew a lot of Teddy Roosevelt lore, as did Rick.
And she was the wild child, so you must have really gotten to chew the scenery with that role.
I always chew the scenery.
That is amazing. Yeah. Wow, thank you. All right. Question 2. The order will go as Ellen, Dennis, John, and Gary. What is your favorite memory of Rick May?
Well, Malia, my strongest memory was the last Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes that we recorded right before the pandemic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we were here in Seattle at Jack Straw Studios on Roosevelt Avenue. And we were sitting around a big table, and Rick was there playing Lestrade. And I had just been cast as Mrs. Hudson, because the regular Mrs. Hudson, Lee Posh, was deceased, and they needed to recast that role. And I think it was my first time as Mrs. Hudson. And Rick was there as Lestrade, and we rehearsed, and, you know, Rick really was wonderful and supportive and loving and funny. And, we rehearsed this Further Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and we went into the studio and we recorded it. And I was really made to feel part of the Sherlock Holmes family. And Rick was one of the main reasons.
Yeah, and
That's
that
lovely.
session, I mean, he had just turned 80,
Mhm.
and he told us at the time that he was dealing with cancer and stuff like that, and so he was not well. And then he went into a nursing home, and that's where he got COVID, and of course that's what.
Mm. Right. Thank you. That was beautiful, Ellen. Um, Dennis.
I was trying to think back on all the times I spent with Rick. I mean, there were several projects that we have cast in together. Um, but I would say that the best memory I have of Rick is sitting backstage at the Kirkland Performance Center in their green room area, waiting to go on, for a show. And just sitting back there, and all the actors would be in the room, and we'd be just chewing the rag, as they say, and making, just being trying to crack each other up. But Rick was always the king of that, and he was just the most fun guy to talk to. He just had such a warm personality, and seemed to be a guy that just was so happy to be doing what he was doing with the rest of us. And I just remember some really warm and memorable hours spent with Rick backstage. Before we went on, when we could just sort of be real with each other and not play characters.
That's great. Thank you. John.
Well, I mean, I've worked with him so often because we did so many episodes of Sherlock. We did not only the Further Adventures, but after we got some British writers in, we decided to adapt the entire canon of the original Conan Doyle stories, and he was all over those too. But really, my favorite story about Rick was that for whatever reason, he called me up and he wanted me to direct Kiss Me Kate. Now, Kiss Me Kate is a musical, and it's based on, I mean, a production of The Taming of the Shrew, the Shakespeare play, and so it's a huge show. I mean, there are all these scenes that go on stage, so you need the set for the set, and then there are all these other scenes that go on backstage, so you have all that stuff too. So it's just an enormous show, billions of costumes, just a huge, huge, huge show. And he hired me to direct it at the theater that he was running. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, this is my last year running it. So when you actually direct the show, I won't be running the theater anymore. And we're moving out of this facility into some other facility, and I don't know what facility they're going to be moving into." Well, the facility they moved into was very nice for the audience, but it had no backstage area at all. I mean, there was like no wing space, no fly space, nothing. And we had to put this huge show into it. And I called him up and said, "Hey man, there's like no space here at all." And he said, "Yeah, you remember the part where I'm not the director of this theater anymore?" It's like, good luck, bud.
Now you know why.
So no, he
It's
was
magic time.
That's right. That's right. He was just always jolly, and nothing ever got him down. And he just completely hung me out to dry with his new theater. But it was a lot of
I
fun.
saw the show, and it was good.
Yeah. We managed to pull it off. And my other favorite memory is that one time Valve booked us on successive sessions out at Valve. And I think, yeah, and I was there first, and then he came in right on my tail and did his stuff. So we overlapped, and we were there talking. And I just remember, of course, Valve, Jim French paid little dollars. Valve was actually a company. They actually sold games all over the world. They had money to pay and stuff like that. So it was a good gig. And it's like he was always auditioning. He came in at the end of my gig and immediately just started chatting up everybody and started auditioning. It's just, you really ought to have the soldier in more things. He was thinking, the soldier should be in other games too and stuff like. I mean, he's just this idea guy. The mind is always going. Like how he could get a little bit more work out of this gig. So he was just great. He was just great. And as a director, because I directed a lot of the Sherlock Holmes shows, and and Dennis, you can certainly I'm sure you were there too, but you never really could count on having a nice smooth rehearsal because at any moment he would break into some kind of digression or diatribe or a story or something like that, and we would be off in the ozone for a few minutes before we were like going to pull him back to earth and get back to work. So he
And
was, he was great.
he was really good about taking a ribbing too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could push him around a little bit, and he would just be like one of those inflatable punching bags that would come right back up again.
Right.
Now, remember that you won't remember these, Malia. These were when we were kids. This is a baby boomer thing. They had these inflatable clowns or monsters or whatever. You'd blow them up. They had a little sand in the bottom of the thing, so you could punch the thing, and it would go down and hit the floor and come right back up again. And that was a favorite toy. I don't know why Rick reminded me of that, but he was just.
No, I'd say
you could push back on him, and he'd never stay down.
Right.
That's great. Thank you. Gary?
Yeah, I really have nothing to add other than my the longest time I spent with him. There was some studio up on Capitol Hill, and it was there were just everybody was there, and Rick and I were sort of way down on the list. So we just kind of sat in this kind of shabby auditioning area. I think it was like a small little black box theater. Forget the name of it, the Odd Duck or something like Odd Duck Studios. And we just spent the afternoon just trading jokes back and forth, just one after another, and just gossiping. And listening to you guys, I didn't realize that Rick was as old as you say, as he was, because
Yeah.
he didn't seem that way. He didn't seem that older than I was.
Right.
I don't even remember the session in Jack's. I don't remember working with him in Jackstraw for some reason. Because we moved there during the pandemic, right, or after the pandemic, wasn't that?
No. We started Jack Straw when Larry and I rebooted the company after Jim French died. So we were.
Was Rick still living then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So we started the company in 2017, and Rick didn't die until 2020, right?
2020.
Okay.
Right. So
how many shows did he do at Jack Straw? I mean, maybe my memory's fit.
Whenever we needed him for Inspector Lestrade, but then he would occasionally be in Harry Niles and Movies for Your Mind.
Oh yeah, I did Harry Niles with him.
Right.
Yeah, he did a lot of the different series.
I mean,
I remember doing all this
voice
with
actor
him
with a
in
very
the studio in Bellevue, but I just didn't remember because I remember being so shocked when I heard he passed away.
Right. But he was one of those guys that had a very flexible voice, good ear for accents and stuff like that. So he was he was a journeyman for us. He was a utility infielder. I mean, he could pretty much do anything.
I do have one anecdote that kind of stands out for me. I tend to be in the series the sort of amateur dramaturg, and I'll read the script and I'll find, because what I love about just working with scripts is that I can learn about places and things, and if I see a name I don't recognize or a place I don't recognize and I don't know how to pronounce it, I go to my dictionaries, I go online, because I want to be as accurate as I can when I'm doing these shows. And I remember finding out that in one particular show, there was something like the Metropole Hotel in London that was mentioned. And I thought, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe I should find out how to pronounce it for sure. And I looked it up and found out that in this particular time period, there wasn't a Metropole Hotel in London. And I thought, well, this is important because there might be somebody in England who's listening to these, and they will know that there was no Metropole Hotel, and they'll think somebody didn't do their homework here. And so I brought this up and kept, I bring these things up, and they say, oh, don't worry about it. And finally, after this session, Rick walked up right behind me and leaned down and said, "Dennis, it's only a play."
So what I wanted to say
I'm like,
at
okay,
the
okay,
time was,
that's the level, Ron. That's good, fine.
what I wanted to say at that time was, yeah, Dennis, there was no Sherlock Holmes either.
Well, that's true. That's true. I'll bring that up
I,
next time.
There you go.
I appreciate the want to be as accurate as possible, though.
Oh, actually, Dennis is a great resource for that. I mean, because he really does his homework and stuff like that. But the new guy we have playing Inspector Lestrade is from England, and so he's become our new go-to guy for pronunciation.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
there you go.
At least English pronunciations for sure.
Right.
All right.
Well, it's great to have an actual Englishman in that show for for a change.
Instead of a bunch of Yanks.
That's right.
Don't you often wonder sometimes if when an Englishman is listening to these shows, what they really think about our dialects?
Oh, they tell us.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, we've gotten really, really, really good comments.
They get fan mail. John and Larry get fan mail all the time.
They complain about Larry, but he's the only one. I mean, they love him.
Larry's not here, so we can say that.
That's right.
Well, I sent a bunch of CDs to an English friend of mine, a Cambridge grad who lives north of London in Manchester, and but I never got a review back from him. I should ask him sometime. I imagine though that an American just sending over some Sherlock Holmes recordings, some people would have, because I mean I did Einstein at in a play at the Taproot Theater, and I studied German in college and high school, so I thought I had a pretty good handle on German. But afterwards, there was a German woman that was the question and answer afterwards, and like a fool, I said to her, "Well, what did you think of the German dialect?" She said, "Well, I came in with my willing suspension of disbelief."
Oh my goodness.
No, my question is, Dennis, was she speaking about the actual German words that you had to say, or was she talking about English with a German accent?
I'm not sure, Ellen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would think that a German speaker who actually learned how to speak English would be the worst person to talk to about how accurate you are doing a German accent.
I know, that's why I said it was a foolish
question.
Foolish question for me, because I just opened myself up. I'm like, I could say, well, what part of Germany are you from? Come on. Because I know my dialect coach, I learned a certain dialect of German in central Minnesota when I was studying up there, and from a German teacher. And we had the tapes, and we would go into this language lab with the headphones and all that. And then when I had a dialect coach for this play, her dialect was completely different. She'd lived in Germany for a while. She was an American, but she'd lived in Germany. And her, she was constantly correcting my pronunciation. I was like, well, okay, I guess that it really kind of does depend on where you lived and how they sound.
Absolutely, it's just like in this country. We have so many different regional accents, and Germany is absolutely the same way.
Well, Einstein was Swiss, so Einstein was Swiss. I mean, he worked in Bern, so he would have spoken Schweizerdeutsch. But even Schweizerdeutsch varies wildly from town to town in Switzerland.
Don and I are watching an Austrian television program right now, created in Austria, and listening to the Austrian German is very different.
Yeah, Wiedersehen, not Wiedersehen. Wiedersehen. That's how they say goodbye. But it's I don't know how we got off on this, but
sense. I mean, Rick was into it. Gary, John, and I, Dennis, we all have been required to do different accents. And for Jim French's Imagination Theater, and now for John Patrick Lowrie and Larry Albert's oral vision, we are all required to do different accents. And that's something that Rick did.
Yeah.
And it's fun. I really enjoy playing with dialects.
Yeah.
It's become a little dicey in recent, just so you'll know as you go into this career, Malia.
Well,
A
true.
little dicey nowadays because, there's sort of a backlash from people who are actors who are actually whatever ethnic group is required. And so, it's you have to be kind of careful, what sort of dialect you're playing with if you're an American now, because they'll usually want somebody who's a native.
Right. All right. This order will be Gary, John, Dennis, Ellen. How did Rick May influence you? Be it your career, which we've talked about, your personal life. It's more of an open-ended question.
Well, I'll be honest. To me, he was just a fellow actor, and but the best kind of actor you could meet at an audition. Someone who wished that wished you luck and allowed, so it was never like, geez, I don't think, you're right for this, or why are you here? Or, there was no competition whatsoever. And it was all just, I think that was the best thing about Rick to me, because I didn't know him as well as the others. Uh, just to see him at an audition and smile and say, "Oh, wow, wow. Well, if I don't get it, I hope you get it," and blah blah blah. So other than that, it was just fun hanging with somebody who liked to tell jokes as much as I did.
Great. Thank you. John?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that, as a negative example, I mean, the things that I would want to avoid doing, I mean, I could look to Rick to exhibit a lot of the behaviors that I would like really not ever want to exhibit myself. He was no, he was he was just he was a great big friendly bear. I mean, he wanted to spread joy. He wanted to spread employment. I mean, he taught at a college in Bellevue for many years. I thought, who better to teach young people to just give them lots of enthusiasm for the future and a lot of confidence and stuff like that, because he was just rooting for everybody. Um, and everybody, included himself, he was constantly rooting for himself. Um, so I just considered him to be a highly treasured colleague. I really enjoyed working with him. But the guy was a maniac. I mean, to take advice from him, you might as well slit your own throat. I mean, this is just he was insane. I mean, he had a good marriage. He was married a long time, so obviously he knew how he raised his kids. He had happy kids. He knew how to live his life. But to meet him as an actor and think, oh, is this guy going to be a role model for me? He's like, no, no, stay away from that role completely.
Too late.
But no, we had a great time. But I can't imagine that either one of us influenced the other very much, because I was as big a maniac as he was, really. I mean, I think that I saw a lot of myself in him. And it's like, I was always ready to work with him the next time. So it was great. It was great.
Awesome. Thank you. Dennis?
Well, I just my most potent memory of Rick is just that he was a lot of fun, and in every session, in every social situation, anything, he was a fun guy to be around. And that means more than you think it does at the time. If you're having a bad day, or there's something that's not going well for you, just have to meet Rick, and like, he was just, don't sweat the small stuff, and just what's the phrase? Be happy. Don't worry. Be happy. And he really was like. I will say that he must have had a competitive streak, because I remember one time, and this was in good humor, but uh, I had booked a spokesman gig for AAA Washington, the Automobile Club, and I just went in and did an audition which called for a Superman type voice. So I did that, and I was also the announcer. So that turned into like a 10-year gig. They just kept calling me back and calling me back, and wherever I was at the time, if they needed to redo it, every year I had another session where I would do like, I don't know, 15 tags or something like that for this campaign. And it was a nice gig, because it paid well for that amount of time. The pandemic kind of killed it. I never understood why the pandemic was so hard on voiceovers, but theater I could understand. But Rick did tell me at one session, he said, that's you I hear on those AAA spots, right? I said, yeah, I've had that gig quite a while. He says, I know you have. I would love, God, I'd love to have that gig. I said, well, have at it, brother, bring it, I don't know, just we'll see what happens. But then they replaced me with a woman, for the next time around. I actually I lost the gig, and then the agent called and said, well, they're willing to hear you audition with a new group of people, which I didn't take too kindly to at the time, because I've done the gig for 10 years. They really need to hear me audition with other people. But then it turned out that they wanted some diversity, so they went with a lady, which is good for you, Malia, because I can tell you that since when I started this building or this business, most of the work went to men. It was pretty much a man's,
particularly announcing that kind
and now
of thing.
especially spokesman type stuff. Yeah, and that changed so completely in, I guess, the late '90s, due to a lot to the efforts of women in the Screen Actors Guild and after. So you're entering a world that's vastly different than for women than it was when we did, in a positive way, I would say.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think, working with Rick, I told the story about, his last recording session and how wonderful he was there. But he put everybody at ease. He just put everybody at ease. And of course he had an ego. He was a performer, he was an actor. We all have egos. But he put everyone at ease. So when I would go out to Jim French's studio, years ago, starting in the late '90s, it just, I always felt very comfortable so that I could do my best work. And that's always what's been important to me. I just want to do good work, as did Rick. And I think that he helped create that atmosphere.
He always made everybody feel like he was happy to see them, didn't he?
Yes.
Right.
Anytime you see him, he was just overjoyed to see you. That was.
Of course, I'm hearing all this now, realizing for the first time that all this time he was flirting with my wife. So,
some friend.
That's right.
Did he know at the time she was your wife?
Oh yeah, he flirted with everybody. He flirted with us. Come on, I mean, he was just constantly on. He was.
One thing I do remember is that I was wearing a pair of clogs one time. And I like the dance go or whatever, and I wore them to the session, and he said, "Those are really interesting shoes, Dennis. I've never seen those before." And I said, "Well, they're basically Danish cowboy boots." And it's like, that's curious. And I thought, where, you don't pay much attention to footwear, do you? I mean, in Seattle,
right.
In Seattle, everybody, there's clogs everywhere. I mean, it's like there's so many Norwegian and Swedish people out here. You've never seen a pair of clogs before, I guess.
All right. So that's all the questions I had prepared, but I do have one more. To my knowledge, you all recorded for TF2 individually, but how is that just being together on a bigger project, knowing that you were all going to be a part of a video game. How did that feel? I don't have a specific order, so anyone can answer.
Well, I think at the time, this is like the late 90s, early two. I mean, well, we were recording for TF2 like 2004 through 2006 or something like that, and then it came out in 2007. But even at that late date, I had no idea what kind of social impact the games were going to have.
Mm,
Um, so, I mean, all of the actors out here in the Seattle area really make a sizable chunk of their income from doing theater
mm,
because there's a lot of professional theater out here. Um, and when you go off and you get another gig, you get like a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial or a Microsoft gig, or if you get a chance to do a movie or something like that, that seems important. But video games are just this kind of odd thing. And since the gigs are so short, it's not like you're hanging out with at Valve or at Humongous or at Monolith or any of these companies and watching all the work that goes in and hearing the reviews come back and stuff like
mm.
that. You go in as a voice actor, you do your lines, and hopefully you get along with the writer and the director and have a good time. And then you go home and you're there for 2 to 4 hours and that's it. And
Yeah. So at the time, I knew that I was in it, and I knew that John was in it. I knew Dennis, I knew Gary, I knew Rick. I didn't know they were in it as well.
yeah, until the game came out,
Oh,
we
yeah.
weren't aware that they were working on it as well.
Right. I don't even think I crossed paths with anybody coming in for the next session. It was just
Oh, wow.
and left. So yeah, until the game came out, we had no idea who was in it. I didn't even know that any of these other guys were doing it.
And
So
it just so happened that Ellen and I were booked back to back, and they had Ellen in, and then I was coming in later, and she went and she said, "So you're working with my husband next?" And they said, "Who's that?" And that's when they found out that we were married to each other, and they thought that was hilarious, and that's why they made us the bickering married couple at the end of Left 4 Dead. So
Where I got cut.
yeah, Ellen didn't make it into the final game.
But I
well,
got
it's an odd it is an odd kind of a situation because all we have in the game is dialogue. I mean, we're rarely monologuing. We're of course
Lines.
we're in conversation, with other people. And yet there's nobody in this. We're not working off of anybody else in the studio. It's not like a radio drama where all the actors in a room together and you can, basically react and act in relation to all these other people. We just get long lists of dialogue lines, and we were asked to do them 3 or 4 different ways. And then they say, that's good. And then they pick the one they like and they do their magic in the editing room and it sounds fantastic. I'm most impressed with Valve and their editors and animators that made this game really hit.
But it's not like the companies are informing us of how the games are doing.
No,
Not
We
at
go in
all.
and do games, and we get paid, and we drop off the earth as far as they're
right.
concerned.
They're going to tell you who else is in the game. So.
I mean, I think it was 2012 before I was aware that I was in something other than just like a day gig, that this was a phenomenon. Nobody said, oh, by the way, your character is getting, a lot of play, or you don't know.
Right.
And
Well, how did you find out, though, Gary? How did you find out it was a phenomenon? Because I didn't find out until I got a call to go to the first Comic-Con. I'm like, they're still playing this game? And which I think accounts for the fact that you guys all got the big action figures of the guys, and I got guys like this because they were all they were all gone by the time I got there. Jay Pinkerton said to me, "Well, we used to have a room chock full of all that swag, but we gave it all away."
yeah.
And I can send you a poster. And so that's
No,
what
I think the first time that I was aware that there's something really big going on was when Valve hired us to do an autograph session at a Dota 2 competition
Right.
at Benaroya Hall.
Right.
The big,
Oh, yes. What year was that?
That was 2012.
Okay.
And
I didn't get the memo. Bummer.
Oh,
You
so
know,
I'm
we
thinking,
all got together and decided that we didn't want you there, you know.
Must be.
That's
Wait, I'm not working with him. Forget it.
right. That's right.
and I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I'll go sign some autographs. I had no concept of what a wild, massive experience Dota 2 was as a game until I walked in. And first of all, the first time I was confronted with all of these cosplayers, and I'm like, wow, wow, this is like, Star Wars on acid for me. I'm like, what's going on here? And it's crowded and nobody knows. You're just walking. I'm just looking like this. So nobody pays you any attention. I looked into the concert hall, and they have the big game on a big Diamond Vision screen with these two glass enclosed things like the Nuremberg trials.
Right. For the teams to play. Right,
Yeah, for
right.
the teams to play in. But it looked like a Quidditch match in the balcony with all of these banners from international competition teams. They were all cheering on their own countries, and I'm just this is phenomenon. Then they wend me down to the bottom of and there's a BBC crew, a TV crew, BBC Digital International, and a nice man with a tie and he says, "Oh, yes, we're here covering the UK, and this is going out. We're live streaming it, and all of this." And he goes, "And who might you be?" And I said, "Oh, well, I play a couple of the characters in the games." And he says, "Oh, oh," and I said, "Yeah, like Lich." And he goes, "You Lich! Oh my God, I've done a documentary on you." And I just what? I had no clue. Uh, it had been so long since I had recorded that I had to be reminded of my voices. They had to give me little, and
Recordings
then
of yourself, yeah.
yeah, and then
This is strictly Dota, then, right? You didn't know about that phenomenon? You're
I
not talking.
no, I didn't know about Dota. I knew and then that acquainted me with the idea that suddenly I was like a rock star in that venue there, and people are asking me to say lines as Lich or Sniper or Pugna. Um, and
Well, I will say my introduction to all that was even more grandiose. We were my youngest son Liam, who is now 26, um, took me to a yogurt store in University Village, a yogurt shop. And as we went in there, he said, "This is my friend runs this yogurt shop. He's one of my classmates, and he wanted to meet you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because he likes Dota. He does Dota." And I said, "Oh, really? Well, that's cool." He said, "No, but Dad, I just want you to be prepared. He may react in an unusual way when he meets you." And we went in there, and it was true. This kid actually does the, what is it, the international? I mean, he
Uh-huh.
is that what it's called?
That's the World Championship is called the International, right?
Yeah, right. So he said he goes to the international and he plays, and he was just, as we all have experienced, he was gobsmacked just by the fact that his pal from high school had a dad who is in Dota. My God. So that was my first
That's
introduction to the reputation of that game.
that's kind of how we experienced it. We started realizing that our friends started becoming cooler with their children when their children found out that our friends were friends with us. It's like all of a sudden our friends said, "Well, yes, I have a lot more credibility with my teenager now because I know, GLaDOS and the snipers." So
Yeah, yeah. In fact, Casey, my oldest son, teaches a high school in Bend, Oregon now. He's in his like third year there, teaching science. And he said, "Dad, I'd like to get a couple of pictures of the characters to hang on the wall because there's a group of kids here that are TF2 fans." And when the last time we went out there to visit him, we went to the high school, and he brought the fan club up to me, and I got to meet all those kids, and it was just a blast. It really was. They were like really happy. Selfies snapping right and left, you know.
But of course, this is one of the big differences between being an on-screen actor and being a voice actor.
Oh
When
yeah.
you're an on-screen actor, it's a very big deal. You have premieres for the movies and all this kind of stuff. And when you're a voice actor, you're kind of like, weird Uncle Harold that you keep up in the attic, and don't let anybody meet.
No,
But tell me, guys, and I want to know
as
from all the
John said.
from all the actors, I want to know, like, maybe I've just learned through my kids how many young people, that just random people, like the day we went to do the short video, and there was a guy in the pizza place, that was like, "Are you guys doing TF2?" And just out of the blue. So when you go and meet people that you think are of age, might have been, I find myself walking into the bank and I see a tattoo on somebody's arm, and I go, "Are you a gamer by any chance?" I say, "Well, yeah, I played some games." I said, "Ever hear of TF2?" Sometimes they'll say, "Oh no, that was before my time." This was usually the answer, but some will say, "Yes, my boyfriend is just a fanatic. Can I get your autograph?" I just, and I find that to be fun. My wife gets really tired of it, but we're in a restaurant or somewhere like that. I say, they're the waiter. "Are you a gamer by any chance?"
But
We might have something in common.
what John has always said is, someone like Tom Hanks, you go to the movie, you see him on the screen, you spend 2 hours with him. For a computer game, for a video game, you hear our voices in your brain
10,000 hours.
after
In your
hour
sleep.
after
Not
hour.
only that, but we're trying to kill you, a much more intimate relationship.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. My Casey had a friend he grew up with, who was a Microsoft mucky muck, and good friends of ours. We did like childbirth classes with him or something. And when the father found out that I was the voice of the spy, because I posted something on Facebook, he said, "Dennis, I didn't even know you did that." He said, "Lucas and I have been killing you for years." Like, God, we love TF2. And I was like, "We didn't know that was you."
That must be so surreal because for people, of course, on the outside, we've been hearing your voices for so long.
Mm.
And it must be very shocking and surprising to suddenly be put into the spotlight. Like, wow, I didn't know people cared.
Well, we met
Um,
you in Boston, didn't we, Malia?
I
Weren't
think you
you at
did.
PAX East?
I watched the panel.
Oh, yes. So you were there when Shork, our super fan friend from Denmark, was moderating, and he said, "First, I want to go down the line and have everyone say the favorite line from the show." And
That's a pretty good short.
That is a good short.
I can't help it. My kids will say, "Dad, you can't do that. It's not appropriate." But we went down the line, and I just remember when I said, "I am not one of your fried chicken tramps. Seduce me." And my wife was in the audience, and she said, the entire room just rose to their feet screaming. And she said, that's when I knew what kind of an impact this game had, because just that line alone, about coming from me, I guess, was enough to get people on their feet. And I was amazed. I was like, good grief, these people are really into this,
It gets you to thinking, and we were paid how much for this?
Yeah.
Not enough.
Never enough.
Oh, yep.
Well, Malia, I have to cook dinner.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, we can wrap it up. If there is anything else anyone would like to say, if you have any questions for me, now would be the time.
Well, what I want to say is, please feel free to contact John and me anytime if you have questions, whatever. we're available. Think of us as resources. And we were so happy to talk about Rick May. And so I'm going to say goodbye because I have to go make mashed potatoes for him.
Oh my goodness. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ellen.
And I would like to say that if you if you like put this up online or something like that, and you want us to put it up on our social media, please send us the link and we'll try to get you some views. I don't know if that's your plan, but if if you want to do that, then I'm more than happy to
Same here.
yeah, yeah.
That
Okay.
would be great. Wow, thank you.
So thank you,
All right.
Malia.
Of course. I guess that concludes it. Thank you all again so much for your time. This is such a I know we just talked about how it's weird, but this is an honor for me. So thank you.
That's so sweet of you, and we hope we'll see you at another con.
Of course, I am looking forward to the day.
Take care.
Thank you all so much. Yes, take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.